Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we got ourselves 3 tracks from an act named CHAW, the first of these titled Cupid Stunts. And if we switch over to here, these tracks are off of the EP titled Promosexual. Now I've already reviewed one track from CHAW before titled How to Drain Your Dragon, which was a fun time. We're going to listen through each of these other 3 tracks from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Starting with Cupid Stunts, let's go. What do we got?
Most people cannot tell the difference between fine wine and sour grapes. Your waist has lost a couple inches, a non-existent piece of cake. With sunken eyes, it's hard to witness this carrot dangling in your face. Although it wasn't your decision, starvation's making you look great. You'll probably need a damn physician.
Interesting filtering of those and panning of those vocals there.
You keep shrinking in this rate. This country has a strange addiction to never give, it only takes. You wish that it was all just fiction. The way your bank account's been raised. You heard them mention your best interest, but they're just talking about your rates. All too familiar, this position.
I like that blues in this best scale there.
So close to losing what's at stake. Downhill, you'll need a lot more friction than you can summon from your brace. Your face gets flattened by the bridge when it hits the wall like a pancake. It's speed times mass and then times distance. Thought gravity for Newton's sake. These vermin fancy themselves victims.
Whoa.
Swine suffocated by the snakes, constricted slowly by the system that they elect and put in place.
Interesting demonic tones of that voice with the imagery on the video.
Feels forgiving. The day we make it to the gate.
No, I think that's a really solid track there. It's just, you know, the storytelling within this, you know, is effective. I dig it. I think it's an interesting addition alongside How to Drain Your Dragon, what I remember of it. But I appreciate what we're trying to accomplish here. Because in these post-track sections, I'm going to provide an overall song analysis of each one individually, lyrics and vocals all the way through to studio production. And at the end, we're going to have like an overall analysis of the tracks with an EP that we've heard today, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. Before we go any further, what do we think this track is about? I think when you look at the title, you know, Cupid Stunts, and then you switch the first letters around, you get a kind of inclination for maybe what they're going for here. It's a track, what I understand, is being about the people that are basically being led to the slaughter by who they elect. It's the people who they think are victims as they get brainwashed into believing a false narrative And, you know, there's such vivid imagery, swine being suffocated by the snakes, you know, and there's an interesting sort of like conversation about how people, you know, St. Peter will feel when they get to the gates, whether they'll feel that they truly have been of good faith or not. Talking about how your bank accounts have been treated and stuff like that. It's visceral stuff, but I think it's compelling storytelling. I think the imagery is done well here. I've no complaints about the narrative here. I think effectively it's stuff that people will be able to relate to. There'll be people that don't, but there'll definitely be people that do. And some of the people that are listening to it might not even know that it's about themselves. Vocally, there's this really sort of sinister tonality across the majority of it there, where we do a lot of double tracking and kind of modulated vocals going down a pitch. We have echoes there at the end of and it's just kind of very sort of unsettling and twisted. And there's a bit of vocal fry and some interesting sort of bluesy sort of like chromaticisms melodically in there. And we have this almost through composed feel to the track there, where we go through this journey, the storytelling there, as we unload more and more and more, and kind of eventually get to the point where we conclude in a way that does feel lyrically and sort of like thematically satisfying. Just the way that we spread the vocals around the stereo field, and we change the positioning of them, is very sort of creepy and unsettling, but in a way where I think you pay attention to it, so therefore it is effective. And there's just this malice that is expressed by the vocalist, as they do harmonize quite neatly. Like, we hit the notes that we need to. We're quite comfortable in a head chest voice. There's no issues at all in regard to the vocal technique. It suits the genre very well. It's just also that the way we express ourselves alongside these and sort of like vary our intensity without necessarily varying the opinions they have. I think that it's just a great balance there. The track itself, at 3 minutes 28, I feel is well structured. There's no filler in there. There's a lot of different drum fills, guitar riffs, and bass lines. Lots of different drum parts. You can tell they were playing the drums there. I feel like it's kind of cool to hear a band just kind of play together in the same room. There's this really sort of organic feel to it. There's slight adjustments to tempo and some bits where we kind of like slow down a bit, then come back up, etc. But I dig the mixture of different double kick and tom patterns there, mixing up our sort of quarters, eighths, and sixteenths really well. And we go between like half time and normal time there, and we add sort of changes of pace there, I think, in a way that is not only just engaging from a listener's perspective, but also gives a good sense of sort of like purpose to the guitars as well, because the guitars are very sort of cognizant in this track of what the double kicks especially are doing. We've got some great sort of alternate picked palm mutes and stuff like that. And I like the fact that our on beats and syncopated is just so tight with the rhythm playing as well. Just got a great tone to our distorted guitar there, nice and chirpy and chirrupy. And we're comfortable with our pedal notes and sort of like moving between like minors and sort of like Phrygians. And like we're comfortable having these breakdowns and slowing things down and making them incredibly intense there. It's not necessarily super colorful in the mid to upper layers with the lead parts, because I don't think they're trying to make this kind of bright and exciting necessarily. It's meant to be sort of like violent and intrusive. There's a moment around the 2-minute 35 mark where like the guitars are filtered in a way where it kind of pushes at you in the headphones and the eardrums there. I just think that that's specifically deliberate in a way that does make you pay attention, but isn't necessarily virtuosic. It's just, it comes back down to a point where, oh yeah, we're sort of slamming it again. It's got this hardcore feel that I appreciate. You know, it intermingles breakdowns with gallops on the drums there. And I think just the bass as a final note, you know, like in amongst the various power chords and sort of like single string pick, like alternate pick melodies and stuff you have on the guitars, the bass is a fantastic accompaniment and sort of like props things up neatly, providing a ground floor with the root note focus that it has, as well as some occasional slides and little bits of ear candy-ish kind of articulation, just to provide further points of interest for the listener, but it's very supportive. So I think in general, the guitar, bass, and drums are done very well here. No filler, structurally compelling, thematically minor leaning, because of course it is. Why would this possibly be in a major key? At the same time, though, I don't think they do it in a way which is too on the nose. I think the vocals are kind of led to do a lot of that kind of heavy lifting there lyrically in terms of the wordplay, some of the kind of like twisted sense of humor, dark comedy that goes on here. But you feel like things are nonetheless well connected. There's great chemistry between the performers in here, and even if there's parts which are kind of slightly off in terms of like keeping tempo and stuff like that, it's still very, very tight. And I'd rather listen to that than someone who sort of quantizes their entire performance. Studio recording, mixing, and mastering is fantastic. I think that in general, the way that we recorded the instrument, should I say, the guitar, bass, drums, and vocals is tight. We do a lot of double tracking and some modulation to the vocals to affect their kind of position and their pitch and sort of their depth within the mix there. We also do some interesting things with some of the frequency response of the guitar parts. Things are typically well leveled within the frequency spectrum with no weird resonant frequencies unless it's painfully deliberate. And the music definitely surrounds you in the headphones with varying sort of like positioning of the vocal parts as well as other things within the left and right side of the cans. There is dynamic range to this. It's nice and loud without pump. Well, a bit of pumping there with some of the side chaining of the kicks there, but it just makes it heavier. No issues at all. Well done. Good start. Because we got Tapped Out, track number 2 for today.
They never ended the slave trade. Just because they switched it to day rates, they still don't increase the pay grade. Yet you don't make a fraction what they make. Say in and out is the same thing. In time's the only number that's changing. You can't retire till 80 while they require it, they charge you for shaving. Their lack of concern's amazing, and they don't care if you feed your baby.
It's interesting to have that major tone to the guitar there.
So when they tell me jump, I say make me. Say make me.
Sick pinch harmonic.
Say make me. Make me. Make me. Say make me. Say make me. Make me. Make me.
It's just a very sudden shift to the like literally the tapping there. I'm not necessarily sure if I'm a fan of how much more sort of like prevalent that is or prominent that is on top of the parts, especially earlier on. But it's more so like there's just a kind of a tension and uncertainty, almost like a little bit unkempt with the ba, 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 ba at the start. And I just feel like that could have been maybe put down like 0.5 dB or a dB just to help it sit. It still could have been dominant, but it could have been slightly less different in terms of the loudness of the other parts there, because everything comes together when you get into that like vocal section there. But we'll talk about this track first before we talk into that more. So I think Tapped Out, it's a track about, I think more so maybe discussing what's going on with like Cupid stunts, but more so about your own sort of quality of life and how you're in a position where you're being told how to live and how to act and how to sort of feel and how to sort of manage your finances, and being told that you're not doing well enough despite the system kind of working against you. To put it plainly, be far less blunt about it. And it's just, I think that is interesting to have that kind of thematic or sort of like lyrical consistency in terms of subject matter across these tracks. It kind of helps the EP feel more connected. And I think that, like, it's real stuff, not being able to retire to 80. Some of the stuff that they're discussing within here is quite important subject matter to consider, even if you don't necessarily agree with it, even if you're from a libertarian perspective. It's just brutal out there. You are not special. The people that are telling you how to do something, you're either the product or you're paying them to be able to sort of get what they have, where at best it's a roll of the dice in a lot of situations. So ultimately, I just feel like this is more sort of compelling narrative from CHAW here. Vocally, we do this really interesting thing that I pointed out at the time, where because we're riffing on the root note, we can have a bit of flexibility with the way that we showcase our main sort of melodies, and we kind of roll with a major leaning there and some of those note choices in the second half of the loop. That is unusual, because you don't usually have that in music, where like you have like such a heavy track and then they kind of go into that kind of major tonality with it. But I think it kind of reflects more the juxtaposition and kind of like the adjustment of maybe expectations here, showing more of a twisted side in a way that's more sort of guitar or like vocal melody oriented rather than the actual expression that you have there. Granted, I think in general there's another consistent vocal performance across the board. We express and communicate really well. The make me part with the vocal fry, the kind of growls, the very sort of visceral early 2000s kind of new metal aesthetic there. It works really neatly. It's feral sounding. Make me. It's like challenging you, like stand your ground, etc. And I think that kind of going from all those words earlier to a far more sort of simple breakdown there before we get into synthetic tippy taps is just a sensible idea there. It's just a nice way to switch up a track, which at 1 minute 47 is not very long. It's not very long at all. You have that synth sequence there at the start, which kind of fades itself in or brings itself up, and it's just cool. It's neat in a sense where it's like, okay, we've got maybe some sort of like industrial sound, like cyberpunkish kind of stuff going on there. That's kind of cool. But then like we kind of bring in those distorted guitars in the low end, and then we have the taps. And I think just again, as I mentioned, the taps just could have been a little bit quieter there in order to sort of better sort of level with the rest of the mix. I think it's more that the taps were where they needed to be, and we were trying to maybe do a thing where we had like sub layer of rhythm guitars to kind of go backwards and forwards with it. But I think maybe the better way to have done that arguably is to have filtered the guitars at the same volume in the digital audio workstation, but to have kind of cut a certain amount of frequencies, either gone for highs and low reduction, so that it still kind of felt like they were as loud, even if they literally had half of it removed. Because I think it's just, yeah, if this was the first track from CHAW that I heard tapped out, not that it's mixed poorly, it's just kind of, if you're not familiar with their stuff, it's more you're taking a gamble on not having the vocals tie things together first. Because once the rhythm guitars, you know, the double kicks, the bass, the drums, etc., once those all come in around the 30-second mark, you're good to go, you know. And there's a great sort of like grinding tone to those alternate chugged rhythm parts and the distorted guitars there. They sound heavy as hell, and I think that the use of the power chords there is fantastic, and the way that the drums push forward as well is really dope. And the bass is nice and rounded in the low end as well, kind of propping things up. And I like the fact that we mix in some sort of like natural harmonics around like the 55-second mark for some fun parts. There's also some really sick squealy pinched harmonics as well. And we even mix some sort of like higher string melody in there amongst those rhythm riffs around the 50-second mark as well. It's just good to sort of explore the guitar a bit further than simply just the lower strings. But to kind of go with that sense of malice after the synth tappy parts come in, or the synth sequence come in like after that little kind of like pushing forward, but to have that breakdown there, we're not taking the listener's attention for granted there. We're not allowing ourselves to sit on one thing for too long. We do move to the next thing rather smoothly. It's almost like we're meditating on the subject matter here and propping ourselves up to stand our ground. And it's just so visceral when you have those guitars, bass and drums come together with the make me part near the end there. There's such a different expression to the vocalist where maybe we've been trying to sort of map our things out internally, and then we've just come to a conclusion about it and we're refusing to take that shit anymore. But ultimately I just think, you know, aside from that minor thing I mentioned about the taps maybe could have been lowered like a little bit, or like things could have been filtered otherwise, ultimately I'm quite happy with the way this track was structured. It's definitely compelling from an actual performance perspective and songwriting perspective there. And they've got different tracks that have range there that I feel is important with an EP, especially like if everything sounds the same or you have the same sort of setup there, it can become predictable and less interesting. Here what we've got is a band that is trying new things and experimenting, but in ways where they are beneficial. Thematically minor leaning, although there are some fun ideas again with the major sort of tinged elements within the vocals there for a kind of more sort of twisted, sort of like kind of contrarian feel to it. To have that kind of more sort of like open and Phrygian modal kind of fat second stuff come in a bit later on there just made things a bit more kind of brutal. And ultimately I just think in general that the way that we kind of navigate through the root notes and allow other things to kind of add that further exposition as required is really good. It's just again great to adjust the feel of the drums to suit the mood of the guitar and for the band to have further chemistry to be able to allow and sort of like elevate things. Studio recording, mixing, and mastering, I mean, aside from what I mentioned about the leveling with the tappy parts there, everything else is really good. I like the way that the vocals were produced in general and the way that the squeals and natural harmonics and stuff came through on the guitars. In general, things have been recorded quite well, no issues at all with it. Like whether they have like a near 4-minute form factor or like a 1:47-minute form factor, the tracks are nice and tight. And ultimately, it's just another effective experience for Tapped Out. It communicates what they want to lyrically, musically. It's great to listen to, and there's never a point of disinterest. So 2 for 2. We have track number 3 now. CHAW, Get Up. Oh.
It's a less than pleasant. Used to get in the pit. You loved making connections. Now you're gone like we're on opposite ends of spectrums. What the hell? You've grown stale like brown milk, brethren. Oh, what a shame. You used to be the life of the party, now this horse is lame. You're not the same. You were once a wild fucking static till like you've been chained. Find it so strange. You can fuck 'em off with the best of all things have changed. Not much remains. Somebody put you out to pasture at home on the range. What's the shit? Just like gifts. You used to be so present. Now
Could use a wordplay there.
you're good. You were my secret weapon. This is not how we thought or felt that we were destined. Please don't quit. Need no split in two separate directions. I'm in need. Please don't flee. I could not stand the separate. Now you look ill. I'd ask you if you need a pep pill. As I fish out kills. Used to love the thrill. You used to be a beast in these streets. Now you lost your will. How did you get so chill? Your coke used to run over. How to get so still? Well, are you for real? I'm begging you to get up and prove to me your deal's not sealed.
Oh, tempo shift. Nice. And the turntablism does work here.
Get up, motherfucker. Help a brother remember just why he loves you. Independence where I'd love to shove you, but time's taking its toll, and man, I know you've suffered. Get up, don't be a buster. You be responsible, I live so flustered. Used to be a butcher, now you can't cut mustard. Is this your last stand? 'Cause I'ma call you Custer.
Okay, I hear you. Yeah. Sick harmonies there as well. Sick, well done. That's awesome. Nice. Sure. It's an interesting experience. Like, there was some sort of surreal stuff going on in the video that I assume... I'm not sure how they made that stuff. I think for the most part it was good. I kind of follow along with what was going on there. I think that, you know, if we talk about Get Up, I think it was more about them discussing a friend that they used to be really close with, and then what's happened is over the years this friend has just changed. And just because of their life situation, or, you know, everyone kind of grows as they get older, goes through different things. You just find people are different. And I think this is CHAW sort of inviting them to kind of get back into it and kind of throw down the pit and just have fun again and just kind of enjoy themselves and be the friend they used to be. Which is interesting after what we've discussed with the previous two tracks, where we talk about the people that kind of blindly follow, that are like lambs to the slaughter, or like pigs, you know, swine suffocated by snakes. You got tapped out, where, like, you know, you kind of destroyed by what you're having to deal with in terms of at least financially and otherwise in society. And you know, we get into a point where we are sort of like trying to make a stand. And then in this one, Get Up is kind of more so, okay, you're aware of all this stuff that's going on. I know you've gone through some stuff, but we're gonna I need you to throw down and get up and show me how much, you know, I mean to you. And it's an interesting journey we go through there. I think that vocally this track seems authentic in its approach there. I think this would probably be someone they actually know that they're talking about here. There is this intensity that is palpable, and you really do feel like they're trying to reach out to this person across a variety of different ways that they do so. I think ultimately we show a similar quality to the vocal performance they have throughout this piece. I've got no real complaints about the way that we sort of like communicate. It's just another effective sort of like culmination of their work across the EP. And the kind of vocal fry, the kind of new metalish kind of overtones of the stuff, like, because again, like with turntablism as well, it does remind me of the kind of almost stuff in the late 90s, early 2000s. It effectively carries itself well in a way that I think is both stylistically sort of like competent, but they're also trying to sort of establish their own niche in it as well. So I think generally, you know, the vocals from CHAW in this track are good. They're a solid vocal technique. And we explore and expand in relation to where the track takes us across the different tempo changes. And there's nothing that kind of is affronting or kind of takes you by surprise. I think that outside of the vocals, this track at 4 minutes 20, I think it's well fleshed out. I feel like the tempo shift was a simple kind of yet sensible idea at this point. When you get past 4 minutes, you do need to adjust the flow and feel of something you're recording to make it more compelling for people. If you just take the listener's attention for granted, they'll get bored and sort of like look away or listen away. So I think here it was sensible for them to try something different. It's more sort of like kind of easy to follow at the beginning because of the way you have those power chords and sort of like bluesy phrasings with the distorted guitars, the drums kind of sticking with an eighth note groove with downbeats and syncopated sixteenths. And the guitar, to be fair, follows along with that. There's a great sort of rhythmic unison cohesion between them. The bass being very supportive as well in the low end. The turntablism that we have, initially I was kind of figuring out what that was and some of the transitions there and tails there, which is, it was because of kind of a unique call and response that I haven't really heard before, but I kind of dig it now. As we went through the track, I sort of more got used to it. To kind of have an addition to that kind of intensity with the doubling of some of the speed of the rhythm guitar parts and stuff like that, and to have the drums kind of coalesce with that was neat. They're further kind of amping things up. But then we come back down to that kind of steady groove there, almost like we're teasing that we're building up to something bigger. In fact, we might even be like, so I'm not sure if the tempo is going faster or slower there, but it does. I'm going to go with faster. And there's like this kind of additional pace that I think facilitates the guitar solo quite neatly. Because of the fact that they've got, I think, one guitarist, if I'm not mistaken, there, you get this situation where the guitar sounds great on its own. I dig it. I think that it's very sort of like present in terms of the fact that there is literally no other guitar or vocals going on then, so it's easy to sort of follow along to maintain. And even though like it starts the track at a steady, and just lead guitar uses some notes that are a little bit unconventional or maybe not necessarily chromatic, but I think they're like playing around with the assumption that you'd make about it simply being minor sort of coded. But it almost becomes almost sort of like chromatic at certain parts there and sort of twisted. And then we kind of continue with this interesting situation there where like, because we have that one guitarist, they've got to commit to that lead guitar as a sub-lead behind the vocals, the bass and drums. So it's almost kind of weirdly gentle at that point in a track where it has been quite heavy. I understand why we made the decision to not have additional guitar takes in the background, because from a live perspective, we wouldn't be doing those additional guitar parts probably. But it is kind of cool to have the harmonized guitars coming afterwards with the chug chugs and stuff like that and sort of further fill out the stereo field again the way which makes it sound huge. And we return to that kind of groove, kind of like chuggy kind of part around the 3 minute 20 mark, familiar territory after we sped things up there. To be fair, I did like the guitar solo. I don't really feel like I've spoken enough about it. We have some interesting articulations there with leads and some like fast sort of interesting sort of triplet patterns there with the rhythm of it. Some like kind of fun playing around with like flat seconds or flat nines or something, like some unison parts there as well with bends. And I think we do some sort of like interesting stuff with the stereo reverb or something like that to make it go out to the sides there, which is kind of neat. We do try and have sort of like width for it. And it's very sort of melodic when it is behind those vocals in a way where the vocals are not trying to necessarily be that way. It's more of a kind of an honest conversation at that stage. So I dig how we balance that in retrospect. When we go into that Don't Ask How High, Just Jump part, it's trying to be more sort of catchy and groovy in that bit, and I do sort of sit with that and enjoy it. I think that it's a nice way to sort of like finish things out. We've gone through this overarching narrative there, and we've found a home with this person that we managed to finally get in contact with. And with that final kind of get up part where he's kind of screaming in the microphone there, he's really calling out to that person to get them to move. And I just think, if nothing else, that kind of anchors this kind of direction for it. Ultimately, really happy with this piece thematically, minor leaning for the most part, although again, we do have some fun sort of like harmonies, like guitar harmonies that kind of roll with sort of like modulated majors in that post solo part. And I think generally, even though there are some chromaticisms in the solo section that kind of maybe infer some of the major alongside the minor parts, it's more to sort of add a sense of sort of a surreal kind of tonality to it. But ultimately well balanced, lots to go on, lots to make the most of within this 4 minutes 20 there. And ultimately, yeah, you feel like the majority minor leaning makes sense there with the frustration, but there's a lot of energy behind it, which kind of almost insinuates they were more sort of focused on getting this person involved rather than mourning the fact that they've had a tough time, which I feel is at the very least quite proactive and pragmatic. The studio recording, mixing and mastering within this track is tight as well. I'm really happy with things for the most part. I think generally the bass guitar and drums were well presented in both the frequency spectrum as well as the stereo field. The vocals as well have a great presence. The leveling in general across the CP has been very good. I've got no complaints about it, and once I got used to the turntablism kind of tone of that as well, that also has other bits of sort of further sort of articulation and representation in other parts of the track, to be fair there. It does adjust, it's not just the same rhythm or chop and cadence each time. It's just nice to sort of combine all those different ingredients and kind of flow on from there. And I leave the track generally just feeling like I have had a good time with it. I think that nice and loud, but a pumping bass compression limiting is handled. And we're going to talk about these 3 tracks more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of these 3 tracks from an act named CHAW titled Cupid, Stunts, Tapped Out, and Get Up off of the EP titled Promosexual. In this section, we're going to provide an overall song analysis of everything from lyrics and vocals all the way through to studio production. Like for the overall of the 3 tracks, I've already done individual per song analyses after each one. We're going to talk about all that stuff as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think these tracks are about? I think overall it's kind of going from the perspective of discussing the people that are like lambs to the slaughter, the like people like ourselves, which are kind of getting wrecked or ruined by things and the unrealistic kind of horrific expectations that we have, as well as the need to sort of really be more sort of cognizant of our position and sort of take a stand where applicable. And then finally Get Up at the end, where I think we're more sort of referring it to someone we know as opposed to a generalized thing, and telling them that we want them to be the person they used to be, the men to us. We want them to kind of stand up and sort of get back into it. And I think that's an interesting sort of like journey that we go through with this. I assume with How to Train Your Dragon the other track I reviewed prior, you've just got an interesting array of different tracks within the scene, that I feel is ultimately effective. I think like there's a lot of interesting wordplay through it there. I dig the sense of humor and dark sort of comedy that we had within this, and ultimately the vocalist communicates really neatly across these tracks, whether it's the sort of like kind of like new middle-ish kind of like rap sections there, the sung parts there, the bit of vocal fry and grit, and some of the kind of malice and some of the whispers and some of the more sort of like fryish or noise parts, as well as the kind of more calling out and sort of like yelling at the person as well. There we express ourselves in a variety of different ways. We use different melodies, not just from scales and majors and minors, but also some blues sort of chromatics there, and some interesting sort of major tones we didn't necessarily expect that there would be due to the minor leaning of the second track in particular. I think that we allow room for example the sub lead and Get Up to sort of speak its truth, and we also allow other elements such as in Tapped Out to have more time in the sun. But ultimately it's just the vocals are handled well. We express ourselves authentically. We show a great sort of awareness and chemistry with the rest of the instrumentalists within the band, and there's never a point where I felt alienated or disassociated or discombobulated with anything that I was hearing. The tracks across the board from Cupid, Stunts all the way through to Get Up are typically between like 1 minute 47 to 4 minutes 20. So there's a change, there's a range. These tracks range from 1 minute 47 to 4 minutes 20, so there's a range of different lengths there. But I typically feel that the mixture of verses, choruses, well, they're typically through composed anyways. They're not trying to go for like a poppy kind of contemporary ABAB side kind of thing. Like Get Up even features like a tempo change and stuff like that. There's mixtures between normal and sort of double time or halftime parts as well throughout. We don't take the listener's attention for granted. But it's that we had lots of different ideas that were presented in ways that transferred neatly and were quite compelling and never felt sort of like strange or too different. It's like they felt like their own isolated concerts, but there was enough in there to keep you listening. They're a mixture of different guitar, bass, and drum parts, as well as some sort of synth layers and the sequences and like CHAW tapped out. And also we had some turntablism and get up, which was kind of neat there. It was like kind of cool to have the kind of chopping and cutting there. That was just kind of neat. Predominantly with the guitar parts, we had a mixture of chugs, sort of like power chord elements there, single string alternate picked riffs there with a majority, we got like some interesting sort of like minor leanings. The lead guitar that we had in Get Up there, that solo section, had a variety of different techniques outside of the palm mutes and stuff, including some slides, bends, some sort of like tremolo tricks there, bit of vibrato there, and we had some fun sort of natural harmonics and pinched harmonics in other tracks as well to sort of like change the feel and flow of things in a way that it did explore the mid to upper ranges of the frequency spectrum in a very positive way that not a lot of instruments were at that point. Even though I wasn't necessarily super sure about the tapping that we had within Tapped Out, which to be fair, you know, I didn't mention it at the time, but having the tapping and Tapped Out is kind of neat. You know, it's great to have the connection there. It's still, you know, like we explore our instrument quite well, I think. Given the constraints of the genre that we're in there, we do make a lot out of it, and we have a variety of different sort of like rhythmic kind of cadences. We show great awareness of the drums when they do their double kicky kind of stuff, and ultimately we fulfill the need for harmonies and melodies quite well. We're typically ruminating around the root notes of the minor keys that are present. The bass line as well is typically sort of referential to what the guitars and drums are doing there, and ultimately, you know, typically play themselves with the root notes quite neatly, although there are some points of slide and little articulations there. It's just a very solid supportive role that's enacted quite well. Fantastic ground bed for the guitars and vocals. The drums have a lot of different patterns and grooves within here. For the most part, I thought they were done really neatly. There's a lot of different double kick patterns. In exploring our quarters, you know, 8ths and 16ths, on beat and syncopated patterns, we have dynamic range to the kit performances there. We're very comfortable kind of pushing forward or kind of breaking down things. We know when to not have drums and when to have them. We're very comfortable with our tom fills as well there. We sort of more center around the hi-hats, crashes, kicks and snares a lot of the time there, but we perpetuate an awareness of when to sort of adjust things, and for the most part we keep a solid sense of tempo, although we're also capable of playing with the rest of the band and kind of going backwards and forwards as necessary, and we also handle our tempo changes as per Get Up quite well. And so ultimately, you know, aside from the ear candy bits like the synth sequence there, which is more of a sort of like a rhythmic response that kind of helps to follow into Tapped Out, and then as well as the turntablism, which is more of an ear candy kind of call and response kind of thing with the vocals in certain sections, as well as a transfer device, you have these fundamental elements that help us get through these three songs, and I think they're enacted correctly. Thematically, these tracks are typically in the minor leaning, though, as I mentioned in the per track sections. You do occasionally have sort of major leanings towards some of these melodies in the vocal or guitar parts there, and Tapped Out will Get Up, and we nail those. I think ultimately it's nice to have that sort of surreal, unexpected kind of like direction to it that facilitates a mood of uncertainty there and the chaos that is discussed. So no complaints from me in terms of like going out of the key for those. It's done in a way that's deliberate and effective. And the studio recording, mixing and mastering in general, with the panning of the vocals there, how well represented they are, how well recorded they are, they're nice and clean and shimmering in the mix with it. And there's the quieter parts, the rapping, the kind of singing, the yelling, or vocal fresh parts, the modulated lower parts, such as in Cupid Stunts, adding a bit of sort of demonic sort of tonality to that. The guitars are well leveled within the frequency spectrum, as well as a stereo field there. And we even have some parts like in Get Up where we just have the guitars on one side there, which I thought was a cool idea. Before we kind of go into the faster bit there, you know, whether it's pinches or naturals or sort of lead patterns, we had the guitar by itself in the lead section, which was good because it performed the main lead as well as a sub lead phrase when the vocals came back in. The bass and drums sort of spread out amongst things, and there's no weird resonant frequencies unless it's a deliberate thing. Again, with some parts of Cupid Stunts where the guitar's kind of honky, but the way that it's like, oh, you know what I mean? It's like kind of got a deliberate kind of push against the headphones to make you feel a bit kind of discombobulated. And so effectively, with the instruments well leveled and presented, things well recorded, etc., you just have your you know, dynamic range with their edge. There is dynamic range. It's nice and loud, but a pumping due to the side chaining, the kicks, bus compression, and limiting is handled. No applicable constructive critique for me personally, outside of what I mentioned about some of the volume stuff and Tapped Out. Ultimately, I think that was a deliberate technique though, and I do think, to be fair, the tapping did kind of make sense once the rest of the instruments came in. From a general overall listener's perspective, I think that this is just a really interesting act who definitely have stuff to say. And I know that sounds so basic, but it's like, how often do you listen to a track nowadays and genuinely sort of feel the need to think about it. You know, the effort that they put into their wordplay, the effort that they put into the variety of different riffs and chops that they put forward is neat. And even if it isn't super complicated in terms of the layering of the instruments and stuff like that, it doesn't need to be when you put this much thought into it. It's just really great to hear people playing their instruments together in a band, having a passion for music and being able to sort of express it with an EP format is dope. So I wish them all the best of luck in future, but thank you very much for watching my review of this tracks off of the EP Promosexual from CHAW. These tracks titled Cupid, Stunts, Tapped Out, and Get Up. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via their various social medias and the YouTube page. Just stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.